Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November version of the Professor Messer A+ study group. This is our monthly study group where we get together and talk about the questions that you have. I've gotten a lot of questions this past month. There's been a lot of changes for those of you that are joining us live. We do this at noon on Saturdays. You can always check the Professor Messer calendar at professormesser.com/calendar to see when the next one of these is going to be. But you can, usually I'm up and running about 15 minutes prior to the show, kind of checking in with everyone, doing a few tests, and I ran into a number of changes. We do this once a month or so, and during that month, I changed software on my streaming device. I changed software on my operating system, and it has changed the way that I'm going to use the screens that are in front of me. So I had to make some changes really quick and then finally get everything up and running. But I think we're here. I would agree with the chat room that there was a moment where I did consider banging on it with a hammer just to see if that's going to happen. Well, as I mentioned, we do this every month. This is something that we all get together and do. I appreciate everything that you do throughout the month. So this is the least that I could do to give back to the things that you're providing on our side. If you'd like to subscribe to our videos and watch them when they're coming in, you can go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a Twitter stream. I'm getting a little bit better with my Twitter feeds. And if you need some vouchers for your A+, Network Plus, Security Plus exam, any CompTIA exam, I have those also available for you, some discounts available for you, 10% at professormesser.com/vouchers. That's compliments of GTS Learning. Well, I have quite a lot of content to go through. I'll also mention that this particular live event is one that you can get CompTIA credits for, continuing education units, and I have to provide you with a certification that you were here. If you'd like to receive those, you can see more information about those. If my head wasn't there, you'd probably be able to see the entire URL a little bit better. There it is. So there is the location you can go to if you would like to be able to have that information there, be able to take advantage of those CEUs. That is a great place to be able to do that. I will also let you know that since we do this every month, there were things that we did last month, and I want to be sure that you can see exactly the things we went through last month. So if you want to go look at our archives, you want to see what's there, you're welcome to go through and do exactly that. We talked about things like what happens if I shrink the paging file in my Windows configuration. Is that something that is a big deal? Do I need to be concerned about that? We talked about being able to flash the BIOS and why you would want to be able to flash the BIOS in your configurations on your computer. Are there any helpful mnemonic devices or ways to help remember port numbers? That's one I get a lot. In fact, I got a lot of those questions this month. I'm not going to repeat myself, but you're welcome to go back to the previous month and see what's available there. You can watch it again and get that answered for you. What kind of tools can I use to help prepare myself for the A+ exam? We talked a little bit about that as well. When will XP be removed from the A+ exam? Boy, there's a good question. And that's one that I think a lot of people are more interested in. But generally speaking, XP is not going anywhere. So the quick answer to that one is it's not going away. I don't think you're going to have a problem there. We also talked about career paths. So we're going to talk a little bit about that also this month as well. And also, what if I don't have access to any computer products other than my laptop? Can I really do this? Can I really get through the A+ exam and do something with this? And I think that also is a good question. It's one of those things that people, I think, may think it's more complicated than it really is. So if you want to see all of those questions, go back to last month, watch the study group, and it is at the bottom of the A+ videos. I'm also watching the live chat, not the one on YouTube, but the one on professormesser.com. So if you're joining us live, there is an A+ study group chat at the bottom, and we can talk about that. I'll see your questions coming in and the things that we are doing there. And I think that also helps me get feedback from you about the things that you would like to see in the study group. It's also interesting questions that come up. You'll also notice at professormesser.com/live that there is a live link, some links to dial in. You could call in to the show and hear more about some of the, talk to me directly. We could even go to some of those now. I'm going to flip over. I see we've got one caller, so I'm just going to go to that caller and see if I can push the right buttons here to have them on the air. And we'll take our first call of the day. Are you there, caller? Oh, I hear noises. One of the challenges, if you call in, by the way, is that you have to be able to listen to the call, because I'm about a minute ahead of you. So you'll probably notice the caller will suddenly realize in about a minute, oh, you talked to me for a moment. There's a lot that's been going on the Professor Messer website. Well, some of those things are associated with the A+ certification itself. There's been a lot going on associated with that. I have all of the videos that you can normally watch online. You can also take offline. If you'd like to know how to do that, you can go to professormesser.com/downloadable-A+, and transcripts and closed captioning are on with those as well. I've also been working on a new set of materials for you. A lot of you said that you're ready to take the exam, but you need some notes. You want to be able to grab some notes, have a look at them, do something with them, have something that you can refer to, because I've got a lot of information in my videos. So for the 801 exam, I did this latest versions for the 801. I'm working on 802 and Network Plus and Security Plus as well. But I have all of the notes from all of my videos, all of the graphics, all of the charts, all of the information that's there you can find in the study guide PDF. I tried to cram everything into it. It's about 9 pages long total. It's one of these things where I just found everything I had and put it in there. All of the information on ports, everything that's on networking, everything relating to the topologies, going through and understanding laptop technologies, everything that's on your 801. I'm going to pull up a version of this so that you can see it. Hopefully I can find the version that I have here. Let me find my copy of the study guide. There we go. You can't see it on your side yet. So here we go. I'll just show you an example of some of the things that are on this study guide. So here's the top of one of the pages. Let me go to this page so you can see it. Here we go. There we go. So this is a good example of some of the things that are in the document that I put together, this PDF that's available. And it's one that I've just taken everything from my videos and put it into this mix. So I tried to get everything in there, and I tried to make it so that you could use this as some notes when you were working with your A+, or getting ready to take that 801 exam. This would be something that you can use to do exactly that. I also have tried to make it something reasonable. So if you wanted to be able to purchase that and take it with you, this is a $10 purchase. So it's something that not too far out of the scope of what most people would like to do. And a lot of people have come to me and said, I'd like to contribute to the website. I'd like to donate some money. And I don't take donations on my website, but this might be a good option for you. You might want to think about purchasing the study guide, and that way it's not a donation. You're actually getting something for the money and for the support that you do to the website. This is an electronic version, a PDF version, and every single bit of this goes directly back to supporting what we're doing at ProfessorMesser.com. So let's now shift gears a bit, and I have questions for you. It's kind of hard to see from the view that I've put up there, kind of tacked my big head onto it, so let's remove that. The question I have for you revolves around understanding how long you have worked with the A+ certification. Now, this also, by the way, is interactive. So you can go to this QR code reader. Remember the QR code reader that you downloaded on your mobile device a year ago and you've never used it since? Now I've got a use for you. So you could grab that QR code reader and be able to use it and go directly to the web page, or go to vot.rs and go to number 619742. No, that number is wrong, isn't it? That number on my, don't go to that one. Go to this one. 619742. See how that works? This is live, people. This is real time. I have no idea where that other one went. So you can always answer the one on the other side as well. But if you want to answer this one, you can go to 619742. It may go to the same place. I know that the front end that I use to view these has changed things a bit on their side. In fact, I'll show you what I'm seeing on this side, but it gives you a chance to vote. Here's the voting that we are doing, and I get to see exactly the feedback from you. So this is one of those things that I have other questions throughout the study group. I'm going to ask you some Q&A, some things that you might be asked on your A+ exam, certainly same topics. So we'll see how ready you are to take your A+ certification when we get to those particular questions. This particular question is one that gives us time to at least go through and understand how to use the voting system, but it also gives me some feedback on how much you have done with your training, how long you've spent going through the process. Is this something you just picked up? Is this something you've been working on for a while? I have one certification I'm working on right now, and I say working on. I started reading 2 months ago, and I haven't read for about a month. So that's one that you could say I've been working on it for 3 months or so. Really, I've only been working on it a month, but I'd have to choose 3 if you went in front of me and said, how long have you been working on that? We've got a pretty interesting list or distribution of who has been studying and how much. And the people more than a year are the people I like to think are the ones that have a life like mine, where it's very chaotic. There's always things going on, and you come back to it, and you leave it, and you come back to it, and you leave it. And others of you are just getting started. So as we go through this study group, I'll keep those things in mind. We'll make sure that we are going through and working with that as well. Now I'm going to try to get my Keynote remote up and running. I don't think I have a way to get this running. I've been trying to get a remote control running on the back end of this view, and I think I do not have this up and running for that. Let's see if I do on Prometheus. Nope, we're going to struggle along with what we've got going there. Let's go through that process. So let's talk about, let me give you the view of what we should talk about for our A+ exam. You've sent me your questions. We've gone through that. Before we jump into those questions, I'm going to go back to the phones. We'll see if anybody is waiting for us. I think we're good to go there. So let's keep going forward and ask some questions from you of what's come in. One of these things that questions that came in during this week is you asked me what's new with the A+ exam. And if you haven't been keeping track of this, things have changed a little bit in the past few months, and it's a surprise to a number of people. There, I was reading through some messages in the chat earlier in the week where some folks said, well, I've got these books that were given to me. They were for the 700 series exam. And if you're in an English-speaking country, there is no more 700 series exam. It's been retired. The 800 series exam is the latest A+ certification. So if you're just starting your training process of trying to learn about A+, you've just begun the process, have a look at your training materials. Make sure that they say that this is for the 220-801 or the 220-802, and you'll be able to see that these are the topics. Now, the content between the two is very similar. If you wanted a real detailed breakdown of what the differences are, if you're somebody who's transitioning from one to the other, you can go to professormesser.com/FAQ, and I've got a video there that describes the real differences. But these are the new breakdowns. So if you look at the 801 and 802 exam, you'll notice that there is not an essentials exam and a practical application exam. Those were the old names for the 700 series. The 800 series just got rid of names completely. There are no names for these exams. It's the 801, it's the 802. The 801, you'll notice, has information about PC hardware, networking, laptops, printers, and operational procedures. The 802 exam shifts a little bit into operating systems, into security, into mobile devices and troubleshooting, and it really does a good job at differentiating topics between the two exams. One of the things about the 700 series was that some of the topics from one exam blended into topics in the other. And what CompTIA has done is really made a nice delineation between those two. So you can see that there are very, very big differences between those two exams. I'll also make a note, you'll notice the exams themselves have different scores associated with them. You have to get a 675 out of 900 on the 801. Well, if you try to do calculations of that, that's an odd kind of percentage, and it's not a percentage. You can't really determine how many questions you have to get right or have to get wrong because all of the questions are worth a different amount. There are also these performance-based questions, which are new types of questions. We'll talk more about those in a bit. The performance-based questions also have different levels of grading associated with them, and these are what we're able to discern. CompTIA is not giving us a lot of details about their grading process, but that's what we believe is going on behind the scenes. So let's also move into your questions that you've sent me over the past week. I think that's one of the things that I love about this particular study group is we're able to get into a lot of the details. So I have a question for you, and let's see if I have the right question that I put on this. The question I have for you deals specifically with the A+ certification, the 801 exam. So if you're studying for the 801, this is going to be a good question for you, and is which of these interfaces can transmit both video and audio, or audio and video? And the number is right. Go to vot.rs to 296703, and you will be able to do exactly that. This is one of the things that as we start working with the A+ certification, there are a lot of video connections you have to know about. The options that are on this particular question are VGA, DVI, component, HDMI, and composite. There's also S-video. Let's see, are there any other video types? I think that covers the bases for the A+ exam, but that certainly gives you an idea of what you should know. And as you start voting on this, you really have to think about both audio and video down a single line, a single cable plugged in. You have to choose the right answer from that. Let's look at those answers. They are VGA, DVI, component, HDMI, and composite. I'm going to give you folks a moment to vote on those things. But one of the nice parts about going through this process is learning about all those types of connections. This may be one you've already worked with before. It's one of those things about being practical use and doing hands-on with these things is it tends to stick in your brain a little bit better. So you may have already used these particular interfaces to do what you do. Let's have a look at the respondents so far. We've got about 24 in so far, and I got a few more that came in on the other side. So I'm going to give you just a moment to bring those in again. There we go. All right, we got 42 people. And remember, no mentioning this in the chat room, no cheating in the chat room. Let's see what folks said the answer was. I didn't really fool any people there. We have VGA, DVI, component, HDMI, and composite. Pretty much everybody said that's HDMI. And you would be correct. HDMI is the type that sends both audio and video. That's a good one to remember. It's a common interface these days for our cable television systems, for our video game systems, our Blu-ray, our DVD. They're using HDMI. And when you plug that in, you'll notice it's a single cable. You don't have to plug in a cable for video and a cable for audio. If you were plugging in VGA, or you were plugging in DVI, or you were plugging in component, or you were plugging in composite, you would need a separate wire to use just for the audio. So it's kind of nice to have that all combined in a single HDMI. I didn't talk about DisplayPort. DisplayPort was another one I didn't mention. And if I had DisplayPort on here, would DisplayPort be a good option here? Does DisplayPort transmit both audio and video? Let's have a look at these different audio and video types and see what the differences are. The reason I asked this particular question is because it's one that came in from John. He said, how does DisplayPort compare with HDMI? I thought that was a pretty good question. So let's break down what the differences are between those. First, let's talk about VGA. We had a couple of people say, yeah, VGA has audio, but it actually does not. VGA uses this DB15 is what you will see it referred to in all the CompTIA notes. It's really a DE15 if you want to be very technical about the size of this particular port. It has 15 pins in it. That's where that 15 comes from. The DE or the DB is the size of the connector itself. This uses a number of things to connect, and you'll notice VGA tends to always be this blue color. There's a standardized set of colors that are used in PCs, and that's why you always see the VGA connected with that blue color. It is only going to be sending analog video. This does not have the option to send any digital video. This goes back quite a while to be able to do that. So the analog signal is one that you'll always find in a VGA configuration. When you're working with other types of video inputs like DVI, it's not just analog or just digital. You could have both of those inside of this. These are a little bit larger in their connections. They have a ton of ports on a ton of pins that are connected on these cables. You notice there are quite a few on this picture, and there's different types of connections, but they all pretty much have the same type of format. If you see a DVI connector, you'll know that. But there are DVI-A for analog, DVI-D for digital. There's even a hybrid that integrates both the digital and the analog in the same connector, but these are only video signals. These are not audio signals. So again, if you have DVI, you will find that it is one that has also just video. There's no audio inside of there. And in the chat room, the point is DVI, there's a lot of the cables you'll find with DVI are white. I'm not even sure what the specific standard color is for DVI, but I have some DVI cables that are black, so you can't always trust it. And even with VGA, you can't always trust that it's going to be blue. Somebody may decide not to go with the standards and give you a different color associated with that one. It's one of those things that that most people will perform the standard piece, but occasionally you'll find something that goes outside of the standard. HDMI, high definition multimedia interface. This is the one we were just talking about that has both the audio and the video in the same stream. This is all digital. There's no analog in an HDMI connector at all. And this is one of those ideas of being able to connect up and have everything inside one cable. This was perfect for the consumer market because you gave one cable that you were, for some reason, are charging them $40 for, that I can get for $2 from Amazon or mono price, and you plug it in, and that's the only thing you need. That's the only connection you need to be able to take advantage of. Now, you know, if you're doing something like Dolby 5.1, you may need an additional audio connection coming out of that. A lot of people will use an optical audio. But if you're doing just some simple stereo on your machine, on your television, then an HDMI works very well. And on your computer displays, HDMI works exceptionally well. A lot of the things that we're doing in the studio here, almost everything is HDMI connected to a point. I'm using also another standard called SDI to switch between a lot of these things. But in front of me, I have my big console at the top that shows me what's going on with the stream and gives me information about what's happening on the cameras that I have, but it's connected via HDMI. I'm actually coming out of my front end via HDMI today, which I don't normally do. So everything you're seeing today is really sourcing out of an HDMI connection. It just makes it easy. You plug in and everything is in that single configuration. There's also a smaller HDMI connector. You don't see this very much on televisions, but if you have a camera, like a video camera, or even some of the higher end digital still cameras, which these days, it's not even still camera, is it? It's digital cameras, both still and video. There's a smaller HDMI connector. I had to buy one of these to plug in this camera that I'm talking to right now, because it has a tiny little or smaller HDMI connector on it, but still HDMI. It's called the miniHDMI. It's a Type-C connector. We want to be specific to that. And really is designed for those smaller devices where you don't have a lot of real estate. They'd put a big HDMI connector on my camera, there would not be room for a lot of the other connectors that they would like to use. Now, we talked about the DisplayPort was part of the question that came in from John. And DisplayPort is an interesting standard in itself. It was really designed from Visa. It's one that a lot of people associate with Apple because they really used a lot of DisplayPort connectivity, but in reality, it was a standard that was created by the Video Electronic Standard Association. The Visa standard allowed everybody to be able to use DisplayPort. And in fact, there were a lot of organizations that used DisplayPort, but probably Apple on their Macintosh hardware was probably the one that picked it up the most. Whenever they grab a standard, they go with it, and the DisplayPort was certainly one of those. It's sending data not as an analog signal, but as digital in a packetized form. So it's like plugging in an Ethernet connection or plugging in a PCI Express connection. And because it was doing that in this pure digital form, it was able to communicate very easily to a lot of different types of devices, like plugging in any other network connection on there. Makes it easy to work with that. And this does transmit both video and audio inside of it. If you needed to convert the DisplayPort to something else, then you would have to be able to convert that with a converter. It has its own packetized format that's not compatible, but there are connectors, some active connections you can plug in for HDMI, for instance, to convert those to HDMI. And if you have the newer Thunderbolt, that's an Intel standard, Thunderbolt, you see it on a lot of newer systems. That Thunderbolt connection is an upgrade to DisplayPort. Thunderbolt is not in the CompTIA exam documents, the exam objectives, but it does have an upgrade to Thunderbolt. And if you have Thunderbolt with that mini DisplayPort connector, which is the smaller one at the top, that mini DisplayPort connector, it's kind of hard to see with my head in the way, so I will show you without my head being in the way. That DisplayPort connector is one that really does, it's compatible with Thunderbolt. You can plug that into a Thunderbolt connection and come out of it with the DisplayPort standard, which is kind of nice. I've got a DisplayPort output from one of my devices in fact, we may be even using this on one of the systems I have in front of me, and I'm converting it to HDMI. It's not doing Thunderbolt, it's doing DisplayPort. So now let's move into some networking. Before we do that, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I've been talking about, I've got that call-in line. I've got some people holding on the call-in line, so I'm going to go to one of these, and we'll see if they're there. Are you there, caller? It's very quiet.
Hello?
Hello, caller. How are you?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good. What's your name?
Andrew.
Hey, Andrew. What question do you have for us today?
I have a question on the switches about the command prompt. There's a lot of them, and I can't really focus on them. I'd like to see if you could go in depth about those.
What certification exam are you studying towards?
A plus 802.
So you're looking at networking switches and being able to configure networking switches specifically?
Also the Windows 7 ones.
Oh, you mean like command line switches at the Windows 7 command prompt? Yeah. Gotcha. And a good point around that very thing, I'm going to bring up on my screen. You will not see it until a few seconds later. I'm going to bring up the CompTIA requirements for the 802 because operating systems are on the 802 side. This is actually a very common question. I got a lot of these coming in because there's so many command lines. If you go to the Windows 7 command line, you type help, there's a ton of things that pop up at the help command. But fortunately, there is a subset of those that we have to worry about. And for the A+ certification, and let me move so you can see this on my screen, get the information up so you can actually view that. Here we go. So this is the list of all of the command lines that you have to know for A+, and it's significant. This is not a small little tiny couple of things that you have to know. There are a lot of things that you have to memorize for the A+, not just for the networking, but the operating system side as well. And this, on the A+, this is, by the way, the A+ objectives. I'm going to talk later on about how you can find these objectives. But if you focus just on these specific commands, then you'll have everything that you need to be able to pass the exam. CompTIA says they could go outside the scope of these objectives, but it certainly is one where we don't have to worry too much about that. If we know these, we're going to pass, trust me. A lot of these don't have a lot of switches, but some of them do. The ping command, for instance, is one that does. And this is one of those times where you almost have to just go into a lab and use it. This is one of those hands-on things. We talked earlier about the performance-based questions. Have you had a chance to go through and look at some of the performance-based questions that are on YouTube?
Well, I've already experienced some on the 801.
Have you already taken the 801 exam and seen some of those?
Yeah.
All right, so you probably already have a pretty good idea that, yeah, they could pop up a dialog box, a Windows command prompt, and say, do something, do this process. And you have to type it in just by knowing what to do. The Windows commands are even more of a challenge because you not only have to know all the operating system commands like copy and xcopy. There are a lot of switches associated with those, a lot of options that you would put after them. But there's also some of these where you don't have to worry too much about switches like MD and RD and CD. The kill command doesn't have a lot of options associated with it. And the CompTIA exam doesn't expect you to know, they do not expect you to know every single switch for every single exam. on the previous versions, they used to give you exactly the switches they wanted you to know. Now they don't. And I think from things that I am hearing, I think that's because they've shifted their focus not to make you memorize every single switch there happens to be, but to understand instead how to use this command. That's not necessarily true when you get into some of these others. For instance, let me find the one. Where's the command? The net command. Here it is. So under networking, this net command, this is the CompTIA 220.802, section 1.3. Given a scenario, use appropriate command line tools. And for networking, this one called net. If you looked at the options for net, it's crazy. The number of things that you have to know to be able to use the net command are extensive. I'm going to pop up a Windows command prompt. Let's look at this real quick, because I think a lot of people asked about this earlier in the week. Is there a specific command that you're running into that you're finding you're struggling with?
Yeah, pretty much the net command.
Yep.
There's a lot of things about it.
This is not too surprising, obviously, because there's so much involved with the net command. The net command, for those of you that have not used this at the Windows command prompt, is the command that really you can do anything with the Windows networking at the command prompt. It is quite remarkable in what you're able to do. You can share different folders. You can remove users. You can connect to different pieces of the network. You can start and stop services. Let's look at these. I'm going to pop up a view here. Let's see if I can get a full screen going of this. We're going to see if this works, and it does. Let's pop open a command prompt, a CMD, and let's see if I can zoom in so everybody can see that a little bit better. If we just type net, I could use net accounts, net computer, net config, net continue, net file, net group, net. There's a lot here that you would have to know for the net command. For your study purposes, to take a simple question you've asked and really kind of come to the end of answering this, you only have to know the basics. If I had to sit down, the ones that people use the most for the net command are net use, and you would have to know all of the different options for net use, or at least the primary options. How do I connect to a share with the net use? Net start and net stop are good ones to know for starting and stopping services. But those are so easy. There's not a lot of command line hooks that you would have to know. And a lot of these use the same type of format. So you can almost guess the command line prompts on these. Let's try, for instance, a net and do a net view. That's another one people will use a lot. If you want to view the shares that are on a particular server. So I've got a lot of servers here on my network. If I do a net view, I don't even know if I have access to view disk station on my network. Nope, I don't have access. I would have to log in to be able to do that. But this is one where labs really, really, really help. And later on in the presentation today, I'm going to show you how you can have labs available from someone else. But if you have a Windows machine available, you can pop open a command prompt, maybe have another computer on your network, and just connect to a share. Have a look at the users, start a service, stop a service, and go through a number of these. You'll find that after a while, it's almost the identical thing over and over and over and over again. And this is one of those cases where it really helps to get hands-on. I think that's one of the best things you can do for that part of the 802 exam, is to get a lot of the hands-on with those pieces so you can get through it. So hopefully that helps with some of the things you're doing. I wish you luck on that 802 exam.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. Let's now go to, I have another person on hold, so we'll go to that one. Let me check chat room. Let's see if anybody else wasn't even checking those in those pieces. PD Squire saying in the chat room also, good tip is when he's at for the, I guess he or she sat for the 801, 802, you could use the help switch at the command line. And you'll notice that in the CompTIA exam objectives for these, let me switch back over so you can see this. There is the option here for command name /?. If you do that, it will give you options available that you can use. And that way, if you aren't quite exactly sure, maybe the exam experience itself will give you some options on what you're able to do with those pieces. So I think that's another very, very good tip to be able to do that piece, to be able to use those things. There was somebody else on the line. Let's take their call as well. Let's see. Are you there, caller? Let's see if we can hear anything. I don't hear anything from them offhand. Are you there, caller? I hear this. Oh, he's listening. I sound great. Let's continue on because I do have some other questions. I'm going to leave you on hold, caller. We'll come back to you if you want to hang on. But I have other questions for you as well. So we're going to flip back to this. Some of you happen to see this question come up whenever I was working with it. Here's the question, another VOT.RS question for you. And I'll bet a number of you already popped over there because I had it up for a second or so. It's what IP class is associated with 205.130.179.10? If you go to 433351, a few of you did get there and try to plug that in earlier. So you can absolutely go back to that and answer that question. What IP class is associated with 205.130.179.10? On the A+ certification, on the 22801, there's a big section for networking. Don't answer this in the chat room, by the way. No answering in the chat room. But there is a section on networking. And for the A+ exam, you don't have to know how to subnet. So fortunately, there's not a lot of math associated with doing the networking side of things. But you do need to understand IP classes, which are really the fundamentals for understanding subnetting. Once you understand the classes, you can move into using classless subnetting, which is what we generally do these days. But the class-based subnet, or the classes, you use as a starting point. And so it's important to know that you can look at a IP address like 205.130.179.10 and be able to understand what class that is. And you should be able to look at it and know in a second or two what class this is. We're going to talk in just a moment about understanding how to figure that out. So you want to be able to really get that part down very, very quickly. It's going to help you when you start going through and working more of what those classes happen to be. So let's see, moving things around on my screen here, what IP class is associated with 205.130.179.10. I'm not even going to move my head out of the way that's in this picture because you don't have to know. We've got about 33 respondents that have sent that in. So let's show the results of what people say that is. We got a little mix this time. Kind of got a little mixer going in. We've got one person said that's a Class A address. One person said that's Class B. 23 people said Class C. 10 people said Class D. So if we look at that, if we go with the people and that are really in that Class C, that 26 people so far, they would be the correct ones with this. This is a Class C address. Let me move my head out of the way again so that you can really see this. For 205.130.179.10, it's a Class C address. Now, how did we know that? How did we figure that part out? Let's go to an idea of how we might be able to figure some of those things out. I got a question this week from Nick who said, what are the differences between IP classes? And so it might be useful to look at these classes and how we're able to work with them. And the real key is looking at the first octet, we call it, the first set of numbers in those four numbers that are given to us that are separated with the decimal point. The first numbers that we want to see are the Class A, B, C, and there is a Class D and a Class E. Class D is used for multicast, so generally you aren't going to be asked what class a multicast is, and Class E is a reserved class. We don't use these IP addresses, so the only thing you really have to know is Class A, Class B, and Class C, and you see them on the screen here. Class A, if that first number is between 1 and 126, it's Class A. If the number's between 128 and 191, it's a Class B. It's between 192 and 223, it's a Class C. You notice we skipped one. We skipped 0. That's reserved. We skipped 127. That is your loopback address on your computer. And other than that, if you just keep in mind 1 to 126 Class A, then 127 is your loopback. 128 to 191 Class B, and 192 to 223 Class C. So there is a little bit of rote memorization to figure that out. But as they're mentioning in the chat room, if you can do the binary calculation that's a little bit outside the scope of the A+. You'll really get into binary calculations of IP addresses in the Network Plus exam. But if you're somebody who's already done that, if you already are familiar with doing the decimal to binary, you'll notice on a Class A address starts with a binary 0. Class B starts with binary 10, and Class C starts with binary 110. So that's another way that you might want to go about trying to figure out what those happen to be. So let's see if we, based on those particular things, let's see another question for you. This one is, what class is associated with 144.2.77.254? I'm going to pop it up on my screen as well so we can have a look at that. So it's another question. Don't answer in the chat room. Do not give that answer out. For those of you watching us live, if you go to vot.rs and go to 561985, you'll be able to see what class is associated with 144.2.77.254. And I will want you to respond to that on your screen. Now, this is something that you may get a question or two of this on your A+ certification. It's just a small part of the A+ cert. And it's something easy to memorize. So this may be an easy question for you because all you have to remember are those ranges. So if you remember the ranges and you look at that first octet, 144, that's all you need to know. The 144.2.77.254, everything after 144 doesn't matter. The only thing that matters at this point is understanding 144 and where that fits into all of those IP classes. This is also something you will run into a lot when you start working with networking, when you start doing subnetting. You'll need to know classes so that you can then understand how to subnet further once you understand what that class is. And if you're planning after the A+ to go to Network Plus, it's one of those things I really recommend that you get into the networking side after A+, because networking affects everything. Everything's plugged into the network. So this is a good opportunity to go through that process and really understand what you need to know from a networking perspective. So let's give you a second more, get those votes in. So we've got these questions that came in, the 144.2.77.254. Let's see our results, and much better. See, we already learned something today. It is a Class B address because it fits into that range that we looked at before. Let's flip back over to our range of addresses, 144. And if we look at 144, we see that fits into a Class B, which is between 128 and 191. Well done. So for those of you that were trying to figure out these pieces, that's it. That's how hard it is to do these class-based addresses. That's not too hard at all, is it? Very, very simple to make that happen. Let's see if we can get that person who is on the phone and holding. We'll see if they're still there. Are you there, caller? I can hear them. They're right there. So close. Okay. We'll come back to them later as well because I have some other questions that have come in. I'm going to flip ahead just a little bit to the section of our presentation that is here for this question. Okay. The question that came in, and there's a question I get all through the month, is where can I get some good study materials? Where can I get practice exams? Practice exams is really where most people want to get a lot of information from, because the practice exams really give you an opportunity to see what have I learned. So I want to make you aware of the folks at GTS Learning. They've created for us a lot of practice exams, and now they have some practice exams that they're making available to us for absolutely free. So let's talk a little bit about that as well. If you go to professormesser.com/fast-track, you'll be able to see some of those, not just practice exams, but a lot of other things that may help you as well. Things like official courseware. All of my videos integrate with all of their books, and being able to work with those. I need to add a fast track that only has one T in it. So I just tried to go there myself and had a problem. When you go to the Fast Track website, you'll see that there are a lot of materials here. They have CompTIA certified materials. So they've already sent all of these things to CompTIA, and CompTIA said, these are great. We'll put our stamp of approval on them. So when you see that CompTIA logo on there, it's because they've gone through the extra step of making sure that this is going to be exactly what you need to know for your certification. They have not just books, but we were talking earlier, the call that came in, and struggling with command lines and wanting to be able to do more hands-on. They have live labs, they call them. They've bundled a live lab in with their freestyle books and questions. Those freestyle, they've got a special price for $99 if you go to that fast track link. That allows you not just the book, but it's also got labs. For a year, you can sit down with an entire virtual lab and step through the 802 exam experience and all the labs you would need to know to be able to do all of those command lines. If you just need a book, special pricing on the books. The book for $30. There's your CAQC, which is that CompTIA certified book type, and it's one that's got an instant download. It's a digital version you're able to use. So if you're in the market and you're trying to find some written materials, you're trying to find sample exams, a lot of other pieces, this is exactly where you can go to do all of those pieces. A lot of capabilities there. If you go to the bottom, there's an option to download free sample files, and this is where you can get information on samples of these pieces that they have. I think that's another opportunity that we can use to be able to take every possible thing available and make use of it. I always say that my videos are great to be able to use for the certification, but you have to do more than that. You have to go beyond just videos. You need a good book. You need a good Q&A. You need a good way to be able to take advantage of those things. So that's one of the things that you are able to do to be able to make the most of your study experience. And I think if you're working along towards getting that A+ certification, you need every possible study material that you could possibly do and possibly use. I think it's really, really important. Let's talk now about the questions about the exam. So we've already talked about some of the topics on video and networking. But a lot of the questions that came in this week talked about the exam itself. One of the questions came from Martin that said, how soon should you do the 802 exam after you've completed the 801 exam? The 802 exam and 801, they have to be taken together. You know, this isn't something you have to worry about with the Network Plus. It's one exam. The Security Plus is one exam. But the A+, there's so much material. It's 2 exams to be able to take this. And some people will take the first one. Some people will take the second one immediately. Same day. They'll just schedule them back to back. And if you've gone through the process of studying all of these things and getting it together, well, maybe that's fine, being able to do that. But I think that when people start working with the exam, they realize there's a lot of material. So they might study for the 801, and then they've got to figure out, when do I take the 802? And is there a limit? So there have been some people that have said in the chat room, yeah, you have to take them pretty quick. They'll expire, but they don't. The 801 and 802 are a pair. You have to take the 801 and the 802 to be able to get your A+, but there is no particular time frame that you must take these between. So you could take the 801 today, and you could wait 2 years. And as long as the 802 is still being offered, you could take the 802 and get your certification. So notice that I said if the 802 is still being offered. So if 3 years ago you took the 701, and as I mentioned earlier, the 700 series has been retired. If you already took the 701, now you can't take the 702. So you can't get your A+ from that. You have to start over with the 800 series. You can't take the 701 and the 802. Those are from completely different series. So you have to be able to do that. Some people will walk in and do both on the same day. That's great too. If you're comfortable with the material and you've gone through all of the exam objectives, you understand exactly what's going to be asked of you, and you feel comfortable with the materials, why not? Walk right in and go through those particular questions. It's a good opportunity, I think, to be able to really take advantage of the time and the studying. And if you're like me, where you're really concerned about being able to have the right focus, I just want to do it all at one time, and I'm fine with that. Well, that's good too. That's good too. That sounds great. I think that's something that everybody should be able to do whenever you work with those things. So I like that people think that way, but also keep in mind that you don't have to do it that way. You can always go through and take the one day, and then wait and study and study and study and take the 802 at any other time. Figure out what makes sense for you. You got to pay money for this exam. If you fail the exam, you have to pay the money again to take the exam. There are some special vouchers that I've seen out there where you can buy a voucher, and for a little bit more money, there's a retest voucher associated with it, but there's always an extra cost associated with that. So it's one of those things that that you really want to think about before you walk in the door. How am I going to go about doing this? Do I take both on one day? Do I separate it out? You have the option. So don't worry that you have to cram them all in to a single day. Carl asked, how long does it take to study for the exam? And this is a question that I just don't have a single answer for you. And it's going to depend on how comfortable you are with the technology. If you've never touched a computer before, you've never worked with an operating system, you've never installed an OS, it may take you a number of months to get all of that information down. There are a number of college courses that take this over an entire semester. And at the end of the semester, finally, you're ready to take your A+ certification exams. Some people are very familiar with the technology. I was in the industry for 10, 15 years before I took my A+ certification. I'd worked with computers. I'd installed the hard drives. I've installed memory. I've done a lot of the hands-on things. Then I looked at the breadth of things that you have to know with the A+. There's a lot you have to know for the A+ exam, things you may have never worked with before, maybe recovering operating systems or understanding shadow volumes or understanding how to get in there and really work with the hardware and work with the BIOS and change the drivers. Those are all things on the A+ exam. You have to be very familiar with that to be able to take that exam. So it took me about six to 8 weeks, as I recall, and that was back in the 600 series when I took the A+ exam. That was a lot of material to go through in a very short period of time for me, and I was able to pick up a lot of things that I already knew, but it was really helpful to have that background there. If you don't have that background, it's probably going to take you more than 6 to 8 weeks unless you just sit down with it every day, go through the labs, really just cram the information in there. But not everybody has that luxury of time associated with it. If you're like me, it's at the end of the day, you grab a book, you've got an hour. You can get an hour's worth in. Well, it's going to take me some time to go through those pieces. And now that they've added the performance-based questions, this becomes a bit more of a challenge. And performance-based questions really change everything with what we need to know for the exam. I'm going to pull up some information on performance-based questions right now. I'm going to type into YouTube CompTIA exam experience. I think this is the one. Yes, CompTIA exam experience. And there is, I'll show you this particular page. Okay, yes, you're very welcome. I'm going to show you this on the screen as soon as I make it a size that you can all see here. Here we go. So here's my CompTIA exam experience. This is a video that goes through the process of everything you need to know to when you sit down to take your A+ exam, what's the experience going to be like? If you look for CompTIA exam experience or CompTIA candidate experience, you'll find this video. And it goes through the process of understanding everything. In fact, it gives you exactly what you'll see on the screen. So if you've never taken one of these exams before, they all kind of use the same format, regardless of what manufacturer you go to. But if you've never done it before, it's all a brand new thing. And that's one of the biggest challenges I have when I sit down for an exam is the unknown. It's the things I don't know about with the experience. So this video will take you through the process.
Non-disclosure agreement.
Yes, thank you so much. And you can see it even takes you through, here's what they look like. Here's what the questions will look like for multiple choice. But if you go forward to about the 7-minute and 50-second, 7.5 minutes, it goes through a performance-based question at the command line. Now, this is what most people think about. I've heard people refer to these as simulations. They're not technically all simulations. These are performance-based questions. And the reason they call it that is because there is some things that you'll have to do at a command line. But if you scroll ahead a bit, let's scroll up to the 10-minute and 18-second part. Here's one where you just do matching. So you have to know interfaces and ports to be able to match these things together. That's not a command line. In fact, that's kind of easy. I can do that. There's nothing I have to train for or prepare for this performance-based question to be able to answer it. I'm going to move ahead to some others that say, here's an exhibit. You have to click a button and it brings up a picture of what you need to know to be able to work with this. And it gives you an example of things that you need to be able to see and work with to be able to answer the question. So packet comes in, it goes into this device, and it comes down to a workstation. What is that? What is happening with that piece? And then you have to answer the question. So you have to understand how these things work. You don't have to configure anything. but this is a great video. It's like 11 minutes long, 14, 15 minutes long. It's a long video. So if you've never sat through and gone through the A+ exam before, that's a great opportunity to learn exactly what you're going to be presented with. And just search for CompTIA Candidate Experience. You'll find that video on YouTube. That's worth sitting down and watching if you've never taken one of these CompTIA exams before, or if you're wondering more about what you'll be presented with the performance-based questions. Got a question from David this week. David asks, what math and formulas do we need to know? Should we memorize all the IRQs? Is there a postcode standard the CompTIA tests on? Tell me. Tell me all this very specific things I need to know. And this is one of those cases where it really helps to know more about what CompTIA is going to expect from you. Some of these things you just aren't sure about until you get into the exam or until you take some of the sample exams that are on the internet. But even sample exams on the internet, some can be kind of sketchy. It's useful to go to a GTS learning company where you know that somebody has looked over those, and it's something that's supported, and they can update and make changes if there's any issues associated with them. Random tests on the internet are a real challenge in trying to understand exactly what to be tested on. But if you go to the CompTIA website, I'm going to go to the CompTIA website so you can see this. I'm going to go straight to their A+ certification page. And on their A+ certification page, right at the top, this is a change they've made recently. Right at the top is a link to view exam objectives. And the reason they put it at the top is it is really, really, really important. So if I click view exam objectives and I can add in my personal information, let's add in my name and my email. And it asks on this page which exam objectives you would like. And on my particular page, I need to select my country. I'm in the United States. And then it automatically selected for me the A+ exam objectives. But while we're here, since I added my personal information, maybe I want to grab some others. Maybe I want to grab Network Plus too. So we can grab as many as we'd like, and then we can get exam objectives. And these exam objectives, you'll notice they have both the 800 and 700 series available, 801 and 802 at the top, and then the 700 series below, because in other countries, until the end of this year, this calendar year, you can still take the 700 series, but you have to know German, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, simplified Chinese, Spanish, Thai, those types of languages. So they haven't converted those over for those languages yet, but by the end of the year, those will be ready to go. If you are in the Americas or you're in an area where English speaking, then you'll need to download the 801 or the 802. And if I click 801, these are the exam objectives. This will tell you everything you need to know. In fact, you'll notice they're putting versions in. Version 3 is the one that's here. In fact, I don't even know if I have the latest version on mine. I'm gonna flip over real quick. This will be a learning exercise for everyone. And I'm gonna pop up the one that I have on my hard drive. So here is this is the 802. Let me find the 801 since that's the one we're looking at. And I'm gonna pull up my version of the 801 exam. This is what I have to go through with CompTIA, because CompTIA will never say, they don't tell you when they change the versions. They don't send out a message. They simply go through the process of putting it out there. And then one of you you're actually better at telling me. You send me an email that says, hey, there's a new version out. So on my screen, let me move this back over so that we can all see it. Let's see if I can find the right one. Okay, here is the certification version that I have on my hard drive. This is the latest one that I have. Notice there's no version number on my screen there. There's nothing there. If I flip over the one I just downloaded, version 3. So this is a newer version than what I have on my hard drive. And what I have to do now is I have to take this version number. I have to take both of these now, and I have to put them side by side, and I have to go back and forth and see what's changed. Now, normally when they do this, when it's this type of thing, it could be a minor change. It could be that they changed a misspelling. It could be that they added a little bit more clarity to an existing type of objective, or they could add and remove entire sections. So let's go to the version 3, because the thing I'm always concerned about is, and a question we've already had here today, so I'm going to flip through these really quick. I don't see anything in the 801 that I have to worry too much about, but I'm really concerned about the 802 exam. So I'm going to change my screen. I can't see on my screen because I zoomed up a bit. I'm going to pull up the exam objectives for 802. This is version 6. I definitely don't have versions. I don't even have any version on mine. And the thing that I always worry about the most is that they added massive sections. So Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, no Windows 8. They didn't get rid of XP and they didn't add Windows 8 yet. That's what I'm waiting for. But they obviously changed something. So one of you can also go through this and find out what that is. And this gives me an opportunity to do a blog posting myself and make that determination to figure out what has changed between these versions. But look at all the information that's here. You can go through this and know everything you would ever need to know. It goes through, for instance, things that are common to all internet Microsoft operating systems. So for internet options, I need to understand what the connections, security, general, privacy, programs, and advanced tabs do. Tells you everything. CompTIA is very unique at doing this. Not everyone gives you this level of detail for the exam. So when David asks, do we need to know IRQs? Do we need to know postcodes? You'll have the list in here. It will tell you need to know about IRQs, but you don't have to know the numbers. You need to know what a postcode is, but you don't have to know specific numbers. This is one of the challenges. If you look at the internet, there is a lot of overlap out there with older versions of the CompTIA exam. You want to be sure that when you're looking at materials on the internet that you have the latest information there. You don't want to run into a situation where you're reading about the 300 series exam. And there's already been a 600, 700, and 800 since then. Don't use those older materials that really ask you for a lot of minutia, ask you for a lot of details, because that's what we used to have to know. We used to have to know the IRQs back in the day. You know, back when I worked with computers, we had to know that, had to know IRQs, because you plug things in, there couldn't be a conflict. These days we have plug and play. Makes it simple. We don't have to know the IRQs anymore. We don't have to figure it out and set them ourselves. So the exam has changed so that you should also change the way you're thinking about working with these materials. So another one of those pieces at being able to understand that. I think that's one of the challenges you always have to think about when working with that is where am I going to find the details of what I need to know for my exam? That's exactly where you need to know, where you need to go is to those exam objectives. And I think that's the best place you can really go to be able to do that. I think that when you start getting into the CompTIA exam, that's really going to be your focus. You really should go absolutely there and be able to look at the objectives, be able to understand what's going to be asked of you, and then make a good checklist before you're ready to take your exam. Check off, make sure you know all the things that it's asking you. And if you're looking at something, I don't recognize that, that may be your opportunity to go back and study more about all of those pieces when you're working with it. That is one of those pieces that I like going through with every exam. Not all manufacturers are going to provide you with that level of detail, but it sure is nice to know that CompTIA has those available for you to be able to work with that. Okay, let's go to the phones. I have someone who has been holding for quite some time, so let's see if we can hear the person on the phone. Are you there, caller?
Here.
You might want to turn down the speaker on the live stream, but I can hear you there. Are you there? What's your name?
Anthony.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks for calling. What question do you have for us today?
I'm calling in on the IP4 and IP6. Basically, I have problems breaking down the IP6 to make it more simpler.
And that's you aren't the only one. During the week, I work with trained networking professionals, people that are in the depths of Fortune 500 networks. They are putting together huge enterprise systems with firewalls and routers and switches, and there's high availability and redundancy and a lot of complexities associated with the network. And they have the same question that you have, which is, what in the world is all this IPv6 stuff? Have you had a chance to look through and see the IPv6 information on the addressing video or some of the other materials you've been working with?
Yes, I have. I understand the sort of the makeup, but when it comes to like if the IP address is drawn out completely, now removing zeros and commas and stuff to make it shorter, that's where I have the problem at.
I agree. And that's if you are asked any question on your A+ exam about IPv6, that's probably one that you would be asked, which is to look at a particular IPv6 address and either shorten it, abbreviate it, or write it out in long form, which one of these things matches. You might also be asked which one of these addresses is a valid IPv6 address. Let's look at IPv6. There's a lot for IPv6 to be able to work with. It's an intimidating address, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's so different than IPv4 because we work with IPv4 for so long, and we're so accustomed to it. Our 192.168.1 network, or our 10 networks that we've been working with, this is a complete departure. One of the things I did in a previous study group, and I want to say it's 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, is we went through an exercise of taking IPv6 and abbreviating it. And I did sort of like I did today, where we did it first, then I took you through the steps, and then we did a sample afterwards. And it was great because people kind of caught it. There is a simple process of breaking it down. And while I've got you on the phone, maybe I'll try to find that particular breakdown because it goes beyond what I created. I think I did use the same one that I used in my videos. Let's see if I've got those shortcuts available. If I click the right thing here on my screen. Okay. The key with shortening or abbreviating IPv6 is anytime there's a leading zero, get rid of the zero. So a good example, I know you can't see this on your screen, but you will in about a minute. Anytime there is a zero in front of those sections of numbers, get rid of the zero. So 08D5 turns into 8D5. That part's easy. So first step, if you got rid of a bunch of the zeros, it certainly simplifies what you're looking at on the screen. The next process is any place where you have groupings of zeros, 2 or more, you can abbreviate those. You can get rid of those completely by putting in double colons. This is what challenges me when looking at an IPv6 address for the first time. That's where I had to get accustomed to this because in IPv4, we don't just remove numbers. They just don't disappear. But with IPv6, there are these long sections of zeros that you're going to be working with. And so the abbreviation would be if you have 2 or more, in this case on my screen, I have 3 zeros that are here. I can get rid of all 3 of these if it's a 0, 0, and 0 together and just put a double colon. I can only use a double colon one time. So if I had another section down here where I had 3 other zeros, I can't abbreviate those. I can only abbreviate one time with the double colon in place. And once you have that done, that's it. Those are the 2 rules you have to remember to be able to shrink down IPv6. I think that the challenge with IPv6 is that it's just so different that it throws us to begin with. But if you just remember, get rid of leading zeros and put the double colon in, you're in pretty good shape. You should have all of the information you need to abbreviate or make that address even longer. And there's other rules, of course, with IPv6. We have to be able to understand that it's hexadecimal now, that it's got, if I back up to that other slide, 128 bits associated with it, and it's now in hexadecimal, which is a format we haven't worked with before. But for the A+, all you need to understand are the major rules, that it's 128 bits or 16 bytes worth, which are 8 groupings of those hexadecimal numbers, and what those rules would be for abbreviation. There's a lot more you have to learn with IPv6 if you're going to be going down that road. A lot more with how you do addressing, how the subnetting process works, how you would integrate that into routing protocols. There's a whole world of IPv6, and I have to tell you, very, very few people that are out in the world that are working with networks are getting into it at a huge degree. I have some people that I've worked with that are participating every year. There is an IPv6 test that takes place where people will connect to your network. You can connect via IPv6 and connect to third parties like Amazon, like Google, like Yahoo, and communicate directly over IPv6, just so you can test it out and see if it's for you. But very few people actually do that. So it's one of those cases where IPv6, the standard, has been out for, 20 years? It's been out a long time. For your A+ exam, focus on the structure, focus on understanding what it looks like, understand those 2 steps you have to do to be able to make the abbreviation there or to unabbreviate it, and you'll be fine. You won't have to worry about any more than that for A+.
Okay.
Any other questions for us today, or is IPv6 the one for you?
Well, IPv6, I'm working at remembering all the different updates and changes going from Windows XP to Windows Vista to Windows 7, remembering those, and the sockets, the AMD from the Intel, just trying to remember what's Intel and what's AMD.
I'm glad you brought that up. There is, obviously in my videos, I summarized for you exactly what's there. A lot of people, and I've seen this, if you pick up an A+ book, do you have an A+ book that you use?
I have one that I purchased from your site.
Okay. So the GTS Learning Materials, their chart is what I have in my videos. But I will tell you from what I have seen and what I've heard, the word on the street, if you see some of these other books, I literally saw an A+ book that had 2 pages of, I think, every socket, every CPU socket that had ever been created in the history of man. It was enormous. And it went through details, how many pins, the voltages that were required for the CPU, the types of memory associated with those pieces, the year that it was created, just these enormous charts. And you look at the chart and you wonder, am I ever going to get through these materials? But I will tell you that if you really focus on looking at my CPU sockets video, I also summarize this in my study guide that I showed earlier. Those types of connectors with the CPUs, let me pull up the exact video, is 1.6, an overview of CPU socket types. That video breaks down what each one of those socket types are, but there's the summary view that I give you in the video, and you're not going to see this till another minute goes by, but you'll notice things like the Intel processors, the CompTIA tells you exactly which ones you need to know, and it's these 4. It's not like you have to know a lot of different sockets in the processors that'll plug in. It's useful to know the type. The release date's helpful to understand which one came first and which one came second, but I don't see that as a critical thing to know for your A+ certification. The kind of CPUs that plug into it. For Intel, almost everything's an i3, i5, i7. The older socket T was Pentium 4 and Core 2. The sort of ported memory is interesting to know about. I don't know that that's a criticality for your A+ certification either. So if you take that context, I have to know socket T, socket B, socket H, socket H2, and they're all the LGA socket type. That's it. That's if I just focused on that, I would be in pretty good shape. And if I move forward in the presentation, AMD has a lot more. AMD has a lot more sockets, but one thing you'll notice with those is they're all very similar, and all of them are PGA except for one, which is the socket F, which is an LGA. So a lot of commonality with that one as well. In fact, if I were you, I probably wouldn't go through the process of even memorizing pins so much. I think CompTIA has gotten away. And this is just my opinion. This may not actually be the case in reality, but it seems that CompTIA is getting away from the trivial minutia, like how many pins on a processor. It doesn't matter. These days, you find the processor, you look at your motherboard manufacturer, it says, I support this particular socket type. You plug in that particular socket, and you're done. You may not even realize how many pins it has on it, and you're certainly not going to sit there and count all 940 pins. So for sockets, focus on the major higher end pieces of information like the socket name. Look at the socket. If I tell you, it's a socket F, you're going to need to know what manufacturer that came from. And you're probably going to need to know what type of socket that happens to be. If you can do that, I think you'll have everything you need to get through what will probably be one question on your A+ exam, if any. So hopefully that will help you out and get you through that process.
Now, within that, we don't have to worry about transfer speed and hertz and stuff like that as far as the processors.
If you look at the CompTIA requirements, I'm going to pull them up on my screen so everyone can see them. They talk about you need to know socket types. It tells you specifically the Intel sockets you need to know and the AMD sockets. And then they change focus. And they say you need to understand CPU technology. You need to understand what the speed of a CPU means. You need to understand what a core of a CPU is. You need to understand what hyper-threading is. But you don't have to know that for each one of your CPU types that are up here. That's what I took away from the exam objectives, and in just casual conversation that I've had with people, that seems to be what their experiences have been on the exam as well. You're not being asked for a specific processor and a specific speed. You may be asked which one of these processors might be the best one to use in a gaming machine. And for a gaming machine, obviously you need a lot of CPU. That's one of the things you have to know, is what fits perfect for a type of system. And you have to know which one of these. They may give you a bunch of 32-bit processors and a 64-bit, so you have to be able to pick out, oh, that's a 64-bit processor, or that's the faster one, that's the newer one, so it must be the faster one. Other than that, you're not going to get a lot of detailed questions about pins and speeds and all of the detailed intricacies of those CPUs.
Yeah, I passed the CompTIA Plus Strata.
Yes.
About a year ago.
Okay.
And I'm working on my A Plus now, but I noticed that in the CEU, the education, what do you call it, to get extra credits?
Yep.
They don't have anything from Strata to CompTIA Plus.
No, and the Strata does not expire. So you don't have to renew the Strata. The only 4 exams that CompTIA creates right now that expire are the A+, the Network Plus, the Security Plus, and their next version of the Security exam. The A+ does need to be renewed with continuing education. The Strata, for those who aren't familiar with it, is an entry-level certification. It's one that really provides the beginnings of a certification type. And when you start working with those and dealing with entry level, if you've never touched a computer before, for instance, it's a great solution. It's a great option to use when you want to work with and understand the basics. And then once you have the basics down and you're working with the Strata, that's a great one to go next, is the A+. A lot of employers aren't specifically asking for Strata, I found. Some are, but the vast majority don't seem to. Is there a particular reason you took the Strata first?
I was in a ROC. I'm an adult, but I went to an adult school because it was cheaper.
Yep.
And I got a certificate as a computer technologist. I also took the Microsoft classes, and I got my certificate as a computer specialist. And I decided that I wanted to continue to get my A+. So since then, I've been on the air listening to you for quite a while now. I purchased the 107, and I was studying that for quite a while. And then it came up with the 801, so I purchased that also from you. So I'm just continuing education so I can get my CompTIA A+.
I think that's where I see most people doing their Strata, is in that learning environment. You're starting from ground zero. It's nice to be able to get the foundation in place, and then you can take your A+. And I think that's a good way to go for a lot of people. Even if the employers aren't asking for it, I think it's a good foundation. We see Microsoft doing the same thing with their MTA exams. We see other manufacturers doing these entry-level primer exams that get you familiar with the technology so that the rest of the certifications are going to come much easier.
Yeah, what was great about the class was the fact that we had hands-on between PCs and laptops, take apart and put back together, analyze, troubleshoot, repair, and that was really a great class.
I think that for the A+, especially the 801, if you have an opportunity to grab a PC, grab a broken one off of eBay, grab a friend that's got an older computer that they don't use anymore, if you have the chance to take it apart, put it back together, and really understand how all those pieces fit together, I think you'll find the 801 is going to be a much easier exam for you.
Yeah, I've been studying for quite a while, and I'm seeing that a lot of things now is just the acronyms and memorizing exactly what each acronym is, so that when you see 4 questions on the exam,
right,
that has to do with something, you understand which each one process does, so you can eliminate things easier.
And that's one of the things when people ask about about working with the port numbers on networking. You know, the A Plus expects you to know a certain number of port numbers. There's about 10 that you have to memorize. If you've never touched them before, it's all just strange letters and strange numbers. But if you start working with firewalls, networks, doing packet captures, or even just configuring your built-in firewall on your operating system, the point is well made that it just becomes a second nature. Oh yeah, I worked with that before. I know exactly what that's about. I thank you for your call. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your time, and thank you for contributing your time to teach us.
My pleasure. It's
very good, and I love it, and I'll be with you until I'm done, and I guess I'll never be done because I'm going to be doing networking afterwards, and then whatever else comes after that.
You're never, never, never done. So I appreciate it. Thanks for calling.
Okay, you have a good day.
Thanks, you too. That brings up a good point about what to do next. When you start working with the technologies themselves and you've got that A+ certification, Michelle wrote in and said, okay, I got my A+, now what? Now what do I do? I've got this great cert. Do I do another certification? Well, if you're like most of us, I think you continue to learn more. This IT technology is one where you could spend your entire life trying to learn what's out there and still not be able to get it all down. I'm still learning things every day with the technology and how it works. But one of the things that I think is that most people will move next, will go to networking. And I usually promote networking after A+. And whether it's CompTIA's networking or somebody else's networking should not matter. It's just that networking is so important to what we are doing on these technologies these days. You've got everything on the network. Everything is there. It's either a wireless network, it's a mobile network, it's a virtual network, or it's the standard switching, routing, firewalling network that we have connecting us to the internet. Everything, whether it's storage, databases, servers, data centers, security, it's all in the network. So if you understand the network, if you're going to go into programming, you need to understand the network. You need to understand how that communicates across the link. So that technology itself is one I highly promote next. Now, once you've got the network piece down, go wherever makes you most interest. That's where you're really going to have the most success, is when you get into a technology that interests you the most. And also keep in mind that the technology that you are interested in today may change later. When I started into IT, I'm out of college, I'm getting into IT, I'm working with these technologies. I worked at a computer store in Miami. I delivered printer cables, but I also did some hard drive upgrades. I got training from Compaq at the time and now HP. I got training on how to work with their servers. I shadowed a guy in our store who did Novell NetWare upgrades. So I learned about networking and network operating systems. And of course, Novell networking doesn't help me very much, that type of networking we were doing then, but it was Ethernet. It was 10-base-2, it was coax, but it was Ethernet. Well, I can apply that today. I can apply a network operating system like Microsoft Windows, like Linux, like a Mac OS. I can understand how the networking aspect works there. I can understand how the hard drives, they plug in the same way as they did back then. And my movements from there, my career moved into a corporate role at an insurance company where I did help desk. And then I moved into server management and IT management of operating systems. I understood Windows. I got a lot of into Windows operating system. And then I got into network analysis. So I moved from OS and moved into networking. That was a big shift. And then I went from networking into security. So these movements through life and things that change, you never know where IT is going to take you. But if you're always going towards something that interests you, it's going to help you a lot as things go on. So that's my recommendation. Get some networking under your belt and then just do what really interests you. If you like servers, go do servers. You like databases, go do databases. You like security, you like networking, do more of that. I think that's a good way to go about looking at those pieces. Well, that will cover, boy, we even went a little bit over this month on our A+ study group. But you can always watch us throughout the entire month and see what's going on. Follow us at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. You can't even see it on the screen that's there. There you go. You can, of course, look at my quick reference guide. And I did notice during the A-plus study group, our live study group today, some of you took the advantage of purchasing that. It's not QRG. It's not quick reference guide. It is live, everyone. It's our study guide. How's that for a quick fix? So our study guide. See, you'll be able to take care of all this in post. And some of you did purchase the study guide. Thank you so much for purchasing that study guide. You keep our stream going here. You keep the lights on. You keep my LED lights on my shiny head during the presentation. Those fast track, the fast track labs, the book, you just heard the last caller was using some of the books and things from GTS Learning. They've got great stuff. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/fast track to take care of that. And of course, we do these every month. Our A+ and our Network Plus study group is one that we always are happy to do. It's one where I'm glad to get everybody together and be able to do that. And even with the odd little technical issues I had prior to this one, you didn't even see it. It went so smoothly in the study group, but you should have seen me 20 minutes before running around. That's just normal IT, isn't it? Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Professor Messer A+ study group.